Hey, everyone. It's Rich Schefren, and we are ready to get underway. If you're just joining us or you've been here for a while, either way, let me know where you're coming from, as Kayvon has already done, as Joe has done from Texas. Let's see. And as Ian has done. Wow, that's kind of small. Let me make these a little bit bigger. And Hey, Gary. Gary is from Queens. Check it out. And Claudia, where are you from? So let's see here. So today, what I want to talk to you about is context. And so, if you're just joining us, turn on your sound. What I wanted, wow, Claudia is from Johannesburg, South Africa. Very cool. Very cool. So we're going to be talking about why the context you create is decisive in your business. And so if this is something that's brand new to you, then by all means, you want to pay careful attention to what I'm going to share with you, because this is really one of the secrets of success that you won't hear in very many places. It's not something I've come up with, so I don't want to take any credit for that. But yet, it's not something that's often spoken about because it's not the easiest thing to grasp. So I'm going to share with you what I mean by context. What do I mean when I say it's decisive? And hopefully give you a greater appreciation of not only what it is, but how it can be leveraged, both in your business and also personally. And so if you haven't already joined the Facebook group, I ask that you please do. And you can do that by, let's see, I want to make sure this, yeah, by going here to the Conversion Club group. And in there, you'll see myself as well as a lot of other heavy hitters from marketing. And it's a highly engaged group. We're also a lot of insiders from Agora. And we try to do our best to help everyone in that group. And it's free to be a member. And I love the hearts and the thanks and the likes. So keep them coming. And if you haven't joined the Conversion Club group, please do. In addition to that, we're going to do another contest like I've done in the past. I'm not really supposed to say that you should share it. So I won't say that, but I can say tell others about the stream, pass the word around. What we're going to do is we're going to take someone at random who has passed the word around, told others about it, etc. We'll pick one person at random, and we'll pick that person tomorrow in the Conversion Club group. And so if you are telling others about it, which I ask that you do, you'll be in the running. And then you got to be a member of the Conversion Club group. And in the Conversion Club group is where we announce the winner, in addition to putting lots of really valuable resources. So how did we get here? Aside from the bigger metaphysical, existential question of why we're here, that's not what I'm getting at. Why I'm doing these Facebook Lives is that because of the quarantine, I decided that it would be great to take advantage of the fact, really, that so many people are home, bored, looking for stuff to do. And this was a great opportunity for me to share some of the wisdom that I've picked up over the years, in addition to really getting my word out to a bigger audience. And so along those lines, I've scheduled these live streams, and I'm going to continue them past the quarantine on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Tuesdays at 2 p.m., Thursdays at 6 p.m. And we're doing those different times so that it's more convenient for some versus others, depending on where you are in the world. And so what we've also been doing is we've been asking you to pass the word around, tell others about it, which you can do right now, and you'll be in the running for the contest. And I didn't share what the award would be this time, so I'll have to do that in a little bit. I trust me that it will be worth your while. And in addition to that, we've also been boosting these posts after the fact and helping kind of get our message out there to more and more people. And so we've actually seen this grow somewhat organically. Each episode, if we're going to call it an episode, which I guess we should, has had a greater number of people each and every time, over the progression of the time that we spend together during these Facebook Lives. So let's see who else has joined us. After Claudia from Johannesburg, we have Logan. Oh, let me move this so that Logan is not eclipsed by our group here. Logan is tuning in from Florida. I hope the weather is nice there, Logan. We have William in New Jersey. We have Jay from Toronto. We have, how would I pronounce that? Joa from Brazil. And let's see. And we have Emily from Southern Vermont. Cool. You're a student of Jim Fortin. Very cool. Tell Jim I say hi next time you talk to him. He's a great guy. So very cool. All right. So we're talking about context. We're talking about why it's decisive in the business that you grow. And so along those lines, what led us here? Well, one of the things that led us here was a conversation that happened last time that we were doing one of these live streams. And that is that it got onto what was my purpose. And we spoke about that for a little while. And so from there, I then made a statement, and I said that if you really want to kind of amp up your business, if you really want to draw out from yourself something more powerful, you have to commit to a cause bigger than yourself. And so I want to go into that today because that will lead us into context. And so that's where we're going to kind of dive a little deeper first in committing to a cause that's bigger than yourself, why that's so powerful, what does that allow you to do? And then from there, it's a very short skip kind of jump to context and why it's so vital to appreciate the context that you're currently living in, the context that you've created in your business, and also the impact of those and how you can shift them. So before I get there, let's just say hello to a few more people. There's Karlyn. Is this still Be Live that you're using? No, this is actually Ecamm Live. I don't know which is better per se, but and I think there's actually something called OBS, which might be superior to everything, and it's free. But Karlyn, I haven't changed that much. Karlyn was a client of mine 15 years ago. I haven't changed that much. I'm pretty technically a dunce, and so I need something to be made simple and easy. And what I found so far is that Ecamm Live has allowed me to do advanced things while still being somewhat wet behind the ears, so to speak. I'm still green with all of this. Generally, when I did live streams in the past, I had a big production crew. Right now, I'm in my home gym alone, and I have a Canon camera in front of me, the same Canon DSLR that I've always used to take photos and do videos in my office. And now I have it plugged directly into my laptop and using that as the camera, and then using Ecamm Live to broadcast here and publish in advance, and then when it's done to upload it immediately to YouTube as well. And so I'm getting more of the hang of it, and I think it's easier for me to do this. The downside of Ecamm Live, at least right now, is that you can only bring in guests through Skype, and that's what I did last week or the week before when I had Katrina Ruth on. So let's see here who else has joined us. We have Mia from Baltimore. Hey, Mia, good to see you again. We have Jason from Denver. Okay, so it's John Paul. Wow, so okay, very cool, John. Thought maybe, is that how you write John in Portuguese? That's interesting. Hey, Mars. Good to see you as always. And let's see. Yes, Jason agrees with me that it is so much easier, Ecamm Live. And also, you can use Stream Deck. You don't even need Stream Deck. You can actually get it as an app on your iPad. That's a little bit more advanced for me, and I'm hoping to get there soon. But I'm trying to balance preparing for these live streams content-wise, in addition to playing with the tricks and tools and things like that. And there's Darren from the Netherlands. So nice of you to say that I'm a bloody legend. It's great seeing you too, and it's great reading comments like that. All right, so what I said is that we're going to have some kind of contest for people that tell others about this live stream while it's going on. So I can't say that you should share it, but I can tell you, I guess, to pass the word around to let others know by pressing a button that will put others here. And one of the things that we're going to do, you know what, I'll tell you now, and then we will dive in. I'm going to do two things. one, and hopefully the office can do this, but if not, I have some here. We're going to give away a T-shirt, the Disobey T-shirt from the live stream that I did back in February. So if we don't have any at the office, I have different sizes here. And so if you've seen the Disobey T-shirt with my face on it, kind of yellow and I think it's just yellow and black. There might be a little red in it as well. Then you'll get one of those. But in addition to that, if you are a lifetime subscriber of Steal Our Winners, then you'll get a half an hour consult with me. If you're an annual member, you'll be upgraded to lifetime. And if you're not a member of Steal Our Winners, you'll get an annual subscription for free. So all you got to do is pass the word along, and we will take care of the rest, and we'll announce the winners in in our Facebook group, the Conversion Club, which you can see the information right there below. So there we have it. So let's get into this, because there is a purpose other than just saying hello to everyone, although I could spend probably the whole time just doing that, and I would enjoy it. But I do want to kind of fill you in on this powerful distinction, mental model, whatever you want to call it, that really can make a difference for you. And it is very much intertwined with the worldview that you currently have. And it really is the current level of mental development that you have, that it's created, your worldview is created by the context that you hold in your life. It determines what you believe is possible for you, what's not possible for you, what you dream of, what motivates you, what you're capable of seeing, feeling, and thus what you can and cannot achieve. It determines how you can communicate with others. It shapes the concepts that you hold the world in and live in. And it's basically also how you understand and misunderstand yourself, and how you create meaning in everything that you do. So with all that said, and that's kind of a lot, let's kind of talk about what I was saying when I said earlier on that we're talking about context and why it's so decisive in your life, in your business, and why it's underlying your success or lack thereof in both. But earlier on, I said what got me to want to talk about this Facebook Live was a conversation in the last Facebook Live where someone was asking me about my purpose, and I was explaining my purpose and talking about how many entrepreneurs that I know, some of the most powerful, are when they are able to tap into some past trauma of their own life and try to make a difference in the world around that trauma. So for me, right, there was, without going into that whole story again, because I prefer not to, I was robbed of my voice. I was robbed of my ability to express. And so part of the way I look at entrepreneurship is giving people the ability to express themselves and create that platform for themselves. And so it's one of the things I'm very passionate about, primarily because of something that I felt lacking in myself earlier on. So it creates a mission. It creates a cause bigger than myself, right? And when you're able to commit to a cause bigger than yourself, it becomes a source of passion. It becomes a factor in developing charisma to lead others and to get others to want to listen to you and be led by you. It also creates a much more powerful reservoir of persistence and joy in the work that needs to be done, especially when the path gets tough. And the path gets tough for every entrepreneur at different times during their entrepreneurial journey. So because of those things, right, being committed to something bigger than yourself allows you to transcend what I talked about, like when I used to do I did a few transformational workshops for entrepreneurs. It allows you to transcend the way that you wound up being. So we each come to this live stream currently the way we are, right? But it's not who we truly are. It's who we wound up being right now. And that's constituted by everything that we've ever experienced. And if there is no cause bigger than ourselves, then there's no reason to transcend who we currently have wound up being. And I don't know if that makes sense. If it does, let me know. If I'm talking gobbledygook, let me know that too. Or if you have questions as it relates to what I'm saying, then by all means put them into the comments, because I like to really kind of make this as much of a back and forth as possible. And I said something last week that I wanted to expand on as well, and that heroes, the people that we look up to, are ordinary people who are given the opportunity of being in action on something that is bigger than themselves, something that allows them to transcend, right, who they wound up being. So when you read the biographies or autobiographies of almost every great leader, every person that we might consider a hero in some way, shape, or form, what we find is that they were called into action by something bigger than themselves, and that it's a mistake to assume that these great leaders, these great entrepreneurs, these great heroes started out that way, that they started out extraordinary, because it demeans what it took for them to go beyond who they wound up being. And it also demeans us, all us average people, because we see them and we think we're somehow different, when really we're not different. What's different is that they were called to something bigger than themselves that had them step out of who they wound up being, and we have not yet, right? So we all have access to being extraordinary leaders, to being extraordinary entrepreneurs, but to get there from here, we have to find that bigger cause. We have to find something that pulls us out of who we currently are into the greatness that we're capable of. What makes any leader, any entrepreneur, any great hero that we respect from ordinary to extraordinary is that bigger purpose, that bigger cause that gets them to, that requires from them more than what they themselves would require of themselves. So the question when I share this with a lot of people is, well, do I need to do this? Do I need to find a cause bigger than myself, right? And the answer is no. Of course you don't. You could start a business and you could make it all about you. You could make it all about the money that you make. And I've met a lot of entrepreneurs like that, many of whom are successful. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that if that works for them. But if you want to be bigger, better, more powerful than who you currently are today, how you wound up being, then yes, you do need to do this, because this is the easiest, fastest path to transcending what has held the current you in place. So if you're satisfied with the effectiveness that you have, with the power that you currently hold, and the actions that you currently take, then maybe you don't need to commit to something bigger than yourself, right? And maybe you don't need to transcend who you wound up being. But if you want your life to be about something bigger, if you want your career, your schooling, your experiences, your relationships, all of that to mean more, right? Kind of like the way Steve Jobs spoke about having faith that the dots will connect looking backwards, and that all you can do today is trust your gut in moving forward. Well, then you really should think about what these dots have been leading you to and what cause can get you outside of yourself. And I was doing an interview yesterday for Steal Our Winners with Alex Jeffries, and we, just by coincidence really, kind of were talking about this, because Alex was saying that he's been 2 years sober now, and that his life got so much better and everything got so much easier when he recognized how selfish he had been in the past, and how much things got easier, better, etc., when he was clear about his intention and doing it for others, and that he prayed that he could be less selfish. And I think that, I'm not saying, well, Alex shared all this in the interview, but I think that, so I'm not breaching any confidences here, but I think we all can recognize that we tend towards selfishness, and selfishness will keep us small and will not have us be something bigger than our hopes and our dreams and the grand ideas of who we might potentially be. So that's what kind of led to this idea, right? About me wanting to share more about context. Because when you commit to a cause bigger than yourself, what you're really doing is you're committing to a context that currently doesn't exist, but that you want to bring into existence. And that'll, I think, be a little bit more clear as time goes on, right? As I kind of lay down these tracks. But I think each of us wants to be the best that we can be. I think that's one of the reasons that we're here right now, when we could be outside or we could be enjoying some reality TV or whatnot. We want better from ourselves, for our family, for those around us. And yeah, sure, it would be nice to have fame. It would be nice to have authority, positions of power, more money. But those things will not move you as much as being committed to something bigger than you, because those things are all about you. And that doesn't mean that you don't get those things when you commit to something bigger. It just means that those things become less important. And when those things become less important and the bigger causes that you commit to become the central idea of what your life is about, the excuses that had come up in the past no longer come up. The wiggle room kind of disappears. So, as we progress to really talking about context, what I'd love to leave you with, and you could share it here or you don't have to, because it's a personal question, but what is your life about? What is your business about? What are your relationships about? What are you committed to that needs you to be bigger than the way that you wound up being, right? What is it? And if that's not clear to you, that's totally okay. And if it's not clear to you, then that might be something you want to write down and start thinking about. What is it that you could commit to so strongly, it would have you transcend how you wound up being? It would make your relationships that much more meaningful. It would make your business that much more certain to succeed because of the level of commitment it would rise out of you. So that's first and foremost, right? And so before I go on to context, let's check back in with the chat. Let's see where you guys are at, and then we'll take it another layer deeper. So let's see where I left off. Okay. Let's see. So Christopher said, persistence and joy are noble pursuits. Totally makes sense. The whole bigger than ourselves concept is a powerful motivator towards decisive action. Yeah, for sure. Because like what I said the other day, I said, I am sure that Martin Luther King woke up many days feeling tired, having a headache, what have you. But he was committed to the cause of racial equality. And that was bigger than how he felt in any given moment. And so he transcended his feelings. This is just what I imagine, right? I didn't know him, obviously, and I'm not equating anything that we're doing to his level. But I can imagine that there were times he woke up and didn't feel like doing whatever it was that needed to be done, because he's human. And yet the cause that he was committed to had him rise to those occasions. Just be extra as opposed to ordinary. Elevating others creates a big boost to our reach and our legacy. It does, but it's more than that, Chris. It's also about seeing something. It's like when I take my daughters to the beach, right? And when we leave the beach, I try to take one extra thing that we didn't bring to the beach to throw away, right? A piece of garbage, something. And why would I do that? Because it means so little in the grand scheme of things. What it means to me, and just me, right, is that this beach is better because we came today. It's not big. It's not better in a big way, but it is better. It's better because we were here. And I think that if you look at life as being a steward for those that come behind you, then you get the opportunity to invest yourself in something that gives your life meaning and purpose. And so hopefully that makes sense. All right. So let's see. Jerome says offensive action has the possibility of success. Defensive action can only avoid defeat. Comes to memory. Thanks, Rich. That must be a powerful quote, I think. All right, let's see what Jay had to share. I resonate with this. My wife passed away in 2014 at 42. I'm sorry, Jay. My kids were 5, 7, and 9 at the time. I took a 4-year sabbatical to recover. While on sabbatical, I was the executor of her estate. Even though I am a university trained as an accountant, I found it difficult. This led me to create a business cause which helps empower families financially. Without that experience, I likely don't create that business. I agree 100%. And sometimes the problems that we struggle with is an indicator of maybe a difference that we can make in the world. It was, I think, because when I first got online, my life kind of went sideways for 2 years, that made it more of an issue that I felt I needed to tackle, because I felt like if I could be kind of sidetracked in my success with all the experience I had in the past, then I can't even imagine how others who had not achieved what I had achieved prior to getting online, I could only imagine what would happen to them. So it's a lot of times in the challenges that we face ourselves that we can transcend that opens up the opportunity for us to kind of lay a new path for those behind us. Let's see what Kayvon has to say. Selfishness has been a powerful enemy for me. Its power has been becoming less and less with time. I think we all struggle with that to a certain extent. There are very few people in the world that are truly selfless, and I think that there'll always be some of it, right? But we can recognize it. We can have awareness of it. And awareness is 70% of the game anyway. When we spot ourselves doing the things that we know not to be in our best sense in any way, whether that's karmically or professionally, we have the opportunity then to change it. Before awareness, there's nothing really. So Chris wants to know, can creating a movement move you to both business success as well as personal transformation? That's an interesting question. And I don't put myself out here to be an expert in these things, because I've thought about them more than most, I think, but I certainly don't pretend to be this overlaps into my wheelhouse as far as business growth and entrepreneurial growth. But I certainly don't put myself out there as an expert on transformation or in creating movements. What I would imagine to be the case is yes, to answer your question, but it really takes a very firm grounding, because it seems to me that most people who create movements, if it's very easy to get swept up into it and have an inflated level of self-importance, and that never works out that well. Or even if the leader themselves is very grounded, the people around that leader tend to get an inflated sense of self. Wild Country is a great movie about that. I have a lot of friends who were fans of Osho. And Osho, I never met him. I don't know him, but I've read lots of transcripts of his, and he seemed very grounded. Sheila, on the other hand, not so much, right? So I hope that answers that question. Gianni, amplify the voice of movers and shakers. Not sure what you mean by that, Gianni, but I'm sure you'll let me know. John. I agree with when you say we tend to be selfish. A bigger cause or purpose can really make us transcend this human condition. James says hi. Yep, one little action that adds to the whole. I agree. Claudia said, I might have stumbled across my cause. It lifts others, and let's see, up, and planning to bring that out more public. Well, that's great. And, oftentimes that's what happens. We stumble into it. It's very rarely do I hear about people sitting down, kind of figuring it out. More often than not, we stumble across it, we bump into it, we help a friend or a relative or ourselves, and through that, the through that we get this opening, if we're able to see it, where maybe there's a bigger opportunity for us. Sandy, FYI, I paused Jeff Beck and Eric Clapton to hear you. Well, that's very cool. I sold Eric Clapton a leather jacket a gazillion years ago. He was in my store. All right, so let's talk about context, okay? So I'm going to try and kind of layer this and give you a couple stories about it as well, because I think some of the stories can really help you appreciate its power. So let's kind of get through the definitions first and just kind of an understanding. And then from there, we can take it into a couple stories. Okay. So what constitutes a context? Well, one way to think about it is that a context is an invisible environment, a bunch of interrelated conditions that structure the kind of interpretation of the way in which our life kind of occurs to us. And I know that's kind of heady, so let me break it down a little bit more. The context of your life or my life is like water to a fish, right? No fish can appreciate that they're in water. They don't see the water. They aren't necessarily even aware of the water. They don't think about water. Yet everything in a fish's world is consistent with and generated from the fact that the fish exists in water. Similarly, everything that shows up in your life, in my life, every word you speak, every word I speak, every action you take, every action I take is naturally consistent with and indicative of our context, just like a fish is to water. So the context through which you perceive a situation, a person, a group of people can be constituted in another way of defining it as your worldview, right? Your model of reality. And that, another way of thinking about worldview or model of reality, is the network of unexamined ideas, beliefs, biases, prejudices, social and cultural embeddedness, and taken for granted assumptions through which you, me, and everyone else interprets the world, interprets other people, and interprets ourselves. So one last thing on here to introduce another kind of concept, but it all falls under the umbrella of context, is that the context through which you perceive a situation or a person or a group of people is also constituted by what another word for it would be frame of reference for that type of situation, right? Or for that given person, or for that given group of people, or that given entity, right? And a frame of reference refers to a network of unexamined ideas, beliefs, biases, prejudices, decisions, conclusions that we've made, social and cultural, as well as take it for granted assumptions. So I want to give you a story, because I think I was talking to Matt earlier today, Matt Risby, my publisher, and he said, let's talk about what you're going to talk about today, and so that I can send out an email for it. And I said, great. And I said, well, if I was writing the subject line, I would write it, and I'm sure he didn't, because I scare him sometimes. I would say that this would be the subject line. This makes priests forget their vows. That would be the subject line. And or criminals to forget to commit crimes. And so those two stories are two of the stories I want to share with you. What does make a priest forget their vows? And what does make criminals forget to commit crimes? But before we do, let's kind of just take a step back for a second. We're talking about context, creating it, and why it's so decisive in the success or failure of your business and your personal life. What led us here was the last Facebook Live where someone asked me about my purpose, and I was sharing that I shared my purpose, but then that led me into a conversation about committing to a cause bigger than yourself, and that when you can, I have something in my mouth, when you can, it taps from within a power that few people can really recognize until they've actually done it, because it allows someone to step beyond the excuses that they've given themselves in the past, the easy outs that they've used before in the past, and really has someone move to several levels higher of effectiveness, because that's what that cause, that's what that problem that needs fixing is pulling from that person. And so that's why we're here talking about context, because when you're committing to a cause bigger than yourself, right, you're creating a context where that outcome is what you're committed to as in a certainty that it's going to happen. And therefore it draws forth from you a different level of execution and commitment. Not as maybe hopefully someday would be nice, but that this is going to happen and I'm committed to making it happen. Okay? So if you're just joining us, let us know where you're from, if this is the first live stream of mine that you've joined us, because we seem to be getting more and more people each and every time. And today we're talking about something pretty heady, but if you can grasp this, it really has the power to help you transcend to levels of effectiveness that no 10 simple steps for stupid people will ever get you there, right? No little listicle, no little BS kind of oversimplified directions will ever have you rise to the levels that we're talking about here. All right, so let me first tell you the story of the priests that forget their vows. Okay, so there was two researchers, last name Darley Bateson, in 1973. They met with a group of students preparing for the priesthood and reviewed the Good Samaritan parable from the New Testament. Now, each of these priests in training, right, were asked to prepare a short talk on the biblical theme of being a Good Samaritan, and then walk to a nearby building to present their talk at a scheduled time. Now, along the way, right, to that nearby building, each of these priests in training would pass a man slumped over and moaning. And the question that the researchers had was, would the context in which a given priest in training encountered the troubled man shape the way that that man occurred for the future priests? And would their actions correlate with the way that it occurred for them? Okay? So that's the experiment. Took a group of priests in training, gave them all a review of what it means to be a Good Samaritan, had them all prepare a sermon on that parable in the New Testament, and then told them all that they would be speaking at this building outside of the building they were in, and on their way, individually, one at a time, they would pass a person in need, someone slumped over and moaning. So, the results, okay? Even after having just heard the Good Samaritan parable, they broke the group into two, right? The control group, and then something different in the other group. What was told to the other group that wasn't the control, right, Something was told to them. 2 words. Just 2 words. And that group, only 10% of the priests in training stopped to help the man in need. In contrast, the ones that were not given those 2 words, 65%, I believe is what it was, 65% of the future priests stopped to help when they believed that they could do so, right? And help this person. So 2 words totally shifted the actions of these priests in training. So what were these 2 words? You're late. You're late. That's it, right? It totally changed. It created a context of I have time versus I have no time. So who these people at their core were people who wanted to help people. That's why I would assume they joined the priesthood. They joined the priesthood so they could help people. They studied a parable about being a good Samaritan, about helping people in need. And then they came across a person in need. I would venture to guess that the 2 groups and their core identity are not different. But 2 words, you're late, created an entirely different outcome. So the context was created of lateness, and it shaped the way these priests in training, how that person in need showed up for them. I would assume that for the 10% that stopped, the other 90% saw that person in need as something that was going to make them later. And for the first group, that never occurred, or didn't occur to that level. So Malcolm Gladwell wrote about this study, and here's what he had to say. He said, hold on. I can't memorize what Malcolm Gladwell said. That would be kind of extraordinary. All right, let's see. Here it is. So here's what Malcolm Gladwell said in The Tipping Point. What this study suggests, in other words, is that the convictions of your heart and the actual contents of your thoughts are less important in the end in guiding your actions than the immediate context of your behavior. The words, "you're late," had the effect of making someone who was ordinarily compassionate into someone who was indifferent to suffering, of turning someone in that particular moment into a different person, having a different way of being. The context is decisive in determining one's way of being and one's actions. The context used the seminarians in that it shaped their beings and actions. Think about how powerful that is for a second. And let me know if that's landing in the way that I hope it is, that the context can change who we are fundamentally, and not big shifts, small shifts. And we're impacted by these so much more than what we might imagine. So there was a study at NYU, I don't remember the experimenter that did this study, but that we could be primed without even our own conscious awareness, just in doing a matching game of words to outcomes or something like that, where all the words were geared towards old age versus youth. And the ones that were doing it towards old age, like Florida, retirement, things like that, walked down the hallway after they were done with the matching game more slowly than those who were not primed by old age. So we're impacted by context, whether we realize it or not. In this case, it was pretty profound. But think about this as it relates now to you. And as it relates to what we were talking about earlier, about a cause bigger than yourself. Your late is nowhere near as powerful as being committed to a cause that you have, that you believe would make the world a different place, that you're absolutely committed to. It is so much bigger than your late. And yet your late can alter behavior in such a dramatic way. So let's kind of check in with people. So Chris says, "Stop scaring Matt. It comes too naturally." I love that, Rich. Very clear. Yes. Okay. So the idea of reality. So the idea or reality of the reticular activating system is the filter for our context when we commit to a cause bigger than ourselves. That's a question. It's what draws things to our attention within our current context. Karma filter. Kind of, right? Like this is really trying to think. This is more umbrella. This sits above it. Conceptual, right? It creates meaning. It explains our purpose, but also guides our actions. So whereas I see the reticular activating system as being more what we notice, this is more embedded, it's deeper within, if that makes sense. And I don't know if it does, Karlyn. I hope it does. Have you written, Kayvon wants to know, have I written about context in any of your previous publications or reports? Not in the way I'm talking about it. So, but this is a good question, Kayvon. I did teach it, but only in the transformational stuff. But what I would say is this, right? So in all of my free marketing reports, right, from the Internet Business Manifesto to the Entrepreneurial Emergency, they were guided towards getting people to take new actions. Some of them dealt with, I experimented with lots of different ways to do that. Right? Some were problem focused, some were solution focused. Some were based on people's identity, like an entrepreneur versus an opportunity seeker. Some were based on method. What's the best way to success? Is it eliminating a constraint or adding more potential? But then some of my reports tried to elicit action or did elicit action by changing the context that the reader saw themselves in. So if you look at the Entrepreneurial Emergency, if you look at the Attention Age Doctrine 2, if you look at the Maven Manifesto, those made a case about the world changing and therefore the person needing to change. So with the idea that oftentimes it's easier to to get someone to move, it's easier to shift the context than it is to discuss the person. I could create an argument that the context that the entrepreneur was in is now changed. I did that with the Internet Business Manifesto as well, but that wasn't the crux of it. So when, in the Internet Business Manifesto, when I talk about the evolution of every industry and that we're moving out of the Wild West stages, that was my way of saying, hey, guys, the context is changing, and therefore what's required of you is going to change. When I did it in the Attention Age Doctrine 2, where I talked about how the rise of Web 2.0 and social media and prospects are no longer targets, they're now your best channel, and how businesses can get destroyed really quickly if they're not addressing their audiences correctly and providing value for their attention, I was creating a new context. And when Jay and I wrote the Maven Matrix Manifesto, that was that there's now more options than there's ever been online or even offline. And so people are looking to what we labeled as mavens, people who are well connected in the market, who know who's good, not, and where to go to get whatever. And so this change in the environment created this new need. So I've leveraged what I'm talking about, but I haven't necessarily written about this, if that makes sense. All right, all right. Karlyn, wow, your late is what we don't experience much right now with COVID-19. So we're kinder and more helpful to others right now, too, for the most part. We exercise more patience in some ways. This is much needed break for humanity. Karlyn, I would have agreed with you early on. I think the world is somewhat bifurcated now. And unfortunately, it seems to follow politics for whatever reason. So I don't know if I want to get into that, only because I have some strong opinions, and I don't want to turn anyone off in my strong opinions. Christopher, you're late. 2 words that shift the perception and alter the expression of your highest value. Who says the words do not have power? Yeah. No, words have tremendous power. Wow. How can we utilize this context when speaking with our prospects or customers? Well, look, when you say you have a limited supply, if you've done it correctly, you're creating a certain amount of urgency. That's another way, right? This, though, I think I answered your question, Jay, in the way I was talking about it from a standpoint of the reports. You can shift the context of the world or their worldview, and by doing so, it then occurs to the prospect of how they need to be to thrive, survive in that worldview. And more often than not, that's easier to do than actually call someone to task. But I'll get more to that. So if I don't, ask me the question again. Cool. That's incredible. Thanks, Elizabeth. Is it Elizabeth? I don't know. Even the way how we say something can have an extreme impact on the outcome, no matter of the content we are saying it. Totally true. So our clarity and certainty overcome context, or are we more easily influenced by our environment? Well, we're definitely more, Emily, we're definitely more influenced by our environment than we believe we are. A great book on that is a book that I read a couple years ago called, it's a book on evolutionary psychology. The title is Why Everyone, and then it has like an enye or whatever, like for a word was missing. And it's Why Everyone Else is a Hypocrite. And it's all about how there's no reason for us to believe that consciousness is the Oval Office, so to speak. It's more the press office. We think of consciousness as kind of being the CEO, but there's really no biological benefit to that. And that, in fact, it's more the press office just coming up with reasons for what the other parts of the brain are doing. All right. So hopefully we're making some progress here. And hopefully that parable of the Good Samaritan and the priests gets people to pause, gets people to think about, wow, context really is powerful. But I have another story. This one might be a little bit more controversial than when I originally taught it, but I don't think it hasn't changed the way I look at things. And if it has changed the way you look at things, then I apologize. I still believe in it, what have you. This is the one about criminals forgetting to commit crimes. Okay, there are lots of theories that state crime is primarily caused by stunted psychological development, genetic predispositions to violence, bad parenting, poverty, wealth gap, what have you. A competing theory is the broken windows theory. And the theory is based on the following concepts. Consider a building with a few broken windows, and the windows are not repaired. The tendency is for vandals to break a few more windows. Eventually, they may even break into the building, and if it's unoccupied, perhaps become squatters or light fires inside. Or consider the sidewalk. Some litter, garbage, etc. accumulates. Soon, because there's garbage on the sidewalk, more garbage accumulates. Eventually, because there's garbage and now more garbage, people even start leaving bags of garbage from takeout restaurants, etc. there. Or even start to break into people's cars in this area. So this was what happened in New York City from my perspective as someone who lived in New York City when Giuliani kind of took over. Police started to make arrests for small crimes such as vandalism, public drinking, jumping the tolls in subways, to create a context of law and order and lawfulness. Okay? And it worked. Once again, we'll go back to what Malcolm Gladwell had to say about this. In the years between the beginning and middle of the 1990s, New York City did not get a population transplant. Nobody went out into the streets and successfully taught every would-be delinquent the distinction between right and wrong. There were just as many psychologically damaged people, criminally inclined people, living in the city at the peak of the crime wave as in the trough. But for some reason, tens of thousands of those people suddenly stopped committing crimes. How did that happen? The answer lies in the power of context. Page 138 to 139. Also Tipping Point, I believe. Gladwell, 2002. All right. So those are two big ones, right? How about reading a book? If you're reading a book for pleasure, it's going to be very different than if you're reading a book and you're told you're going to be tested on this. It's also going to be very different if you're told that you're going to need to teach on this. The book is the same. The learner is the same. All that's changed is the context. So, as I'm going over these, if I'm you and I'm first hearing this, I'm exploring whether or not the context that I've been living in, the one I've created for myself, is generating the actions that I want out of life, that I want out of myself. The context from which you operate can always change, even if some of the facts of life cannot. If your general context is joyless, right, then any experience that you have of joy is likely to be rare and temporary. There's a saying in transformation: ferns die in the desert. And joy cannot thrive in a joyless context. People who function from a context of scarcity typically don't have enough money. They don't have enough time. They don't have enough friends. They don't have enough confidence. They don't have enough education and so on to accomplish their dreams. Conversely, right, those who operate from a context of abundance typically generate the resources. They're more resourceful to manifest their commitments. So the good news with all this is that you can shift your context by doing so, reshaping the possibilities that are in front of you. And that's what really called me towards transformation, to recognize that the game I was playing was smaller than who I wanted to be, and that the content of the life that you're living right now is giving you valuable information about the context by which you live in and by. And that one of the most effective ways to generate change is through transformation. And transformation is a conversion of context that then dictates your actions. When you go for therapy, for example, you're having problems in your relationship. Your therapist doesn't change the people. They change your perspective, your maps of reality. And by changing your maps of reality, you begin to see things differently. And because you see things differently, you start doing things differently. So let's now take a step back for a second and think about business. When we think about business, right, think about now everything that we just spoke about as it relates to a mission statement, the business's purpose, these elements that so many people take for granted. Because in light of what we're talking about here, these are the things that create the context of your business. I had this client of mine who was a big fan of Dan Kennedy, who read a lot of Dan Kennedy's books and had tremendous awe and respect for Dan, as I do. But he had employees that would go out for lunch and take an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours instead of the hour. And he told me, this was in a rant that he was telling me about, he told me he was going to install cameras. And then he asked me, did I think that would make a difference? And I told him, no, I don't think it's going to make any difference. And he was perplexed. Why? What do you mean? I said, because Dan Kennedy has created a context in his business that that's not okay. And he does not need a camera to spy on people to make it okay or not okay. He's created the context that it's just not okay to take 2 hours for lunch. It's not okay. And you putting up cameras is no different than you being there. And they do it when you're there. So you've created a context that it is okay to take 2 hours for lunch. And until you adjust that, it doesn't matter what else you do. There are people and that when you're around them, you can't help but feeling down. And there are people who, when you're around them, you can't help but feeling up. Those people are creating contexts around them based on what they say, based on their presence, based on the emotions that they are currently holding. So, as it relates to business, right? And I just wanted to pull up my notes here. Your mission statement, your statement of purpose, your goals, your declared priorities, right? These are all elements where you're defining a context. And that context then determines, right? It creates a background where certain future actions now are interpreted as appropriate, good, and right, and other future actions are now interpreted as inappropriate, bad, or unacceptable. I have 3 daughters, 2 biological, 1 step, right? So and they were all teenagers, right? But if I go back 10 years ago, when I just had my 2 biological daughters, Ava and Elle, and they were much younger, and they're watching their iPad at 10 p.m., right? The next week goes by, and now I institute a new rule that there'll be no more watching of iPads after 9 p.m. Then next week, on Thursday, Ava's watching her iPad at 10 p.m. Watching her iPad last week was at 10 p.m. was fine, but this week it's wrong. And the only thing that's different is that I changed the context. And the way I changed the context was speaking. Ava's actions didn't change, but the way her actions are perceived totally changed. The meaning of her actions changed. So this is one of the ways that we can shift context is just by our ability to speak. So words do matter. Mission statements, statements of purpose, declared priorities, goals matter. The problems that you take on in the world matter. Solving bigger problems for fun is part of what the game of business is all about. And like I said, I know this is heady stuff, but if you can get your head around it and you can get a sense of how malleable reality is, the reality that we all live in, you can get a sense that you might have been playing a much smaller game than you could. That one of the things that will change the way that you grow your business and the way you act in your business and what you hold others to in your business is the context that you create in your business. What is your business all about? What is it that will have you transcend the way you wound up being and have you become something much better than you're capable of just becoming for yourself, because that's what's required, because this cause requires it. Whew. So I'd love to answer some questions. I'm feeling very like I'm lecturing a little much, and that's not my intent here. So let's see here. All right, so let's see what Kayvon has to say here. So after the influence of context and all related ideas are considered, what is left is such a small percentage of what we do or can do. We think we are controlling our life or situations, but we really are not. I didn't say that, Kayvon, which reminds me of something else that I do need to talk about, which is being cause in the matter, which is something I learned from Werner Erhard, so I'll get to that. As big as the impact our heroes had. The point is, in a bigger perspective, the ones that does nothing and the one who has a big impact is only a small amount apart yet to the person. It feels very hard and very big because that is all they see. Like fish to water, they don't have the bigger context. Would love to know your thoughts. Thanks. Well, I'm not sure I'm answering the question, Kayvon. And what I would say is that I don't pretend I have the answers. I just have my answers, right? And I'm very much, I identify with the existentialists of the world. Heidegger, Sartre, right? Nietzsche. And I really believe that life is somewhat empty and meaningless, which can be incredibly nihilistic and depressing, or it can be incredibly uplifting and full of possibility. Because if life is empty and meaningless, then what it means is that it's up to you to create the meaning of your life. And so it's not about solving a bigger problem or committing to a cause bigger than yourself so that it's someday that there's a statue erected in on your behalf. But it's more about life without meaning is kind of sucky, as someone who's been there and experienced a midlife crisis and all that kind of stuff. And so we all have this fantasy, or at least I had this fantasy, of what being retired and not having a purpose would be like, but I can tell you that it was much more of a horror show than a fantasy after the first year or two of not feeling like I had any purpose. And so, some people, because of their religious beliefs, I guess, have a pretty built-in purpose. I did not. And so for me, this then creates a life of meaning because it's up to me to define the meaning of my life. To each their own. And I don't know if that answers really what you're asking me or not. But it's, one of the things, I think one thing that is possibly like a way of accessing this is to think about what are the things that you're most proud of in your life, things that you've done that you're most proud of. I think that starts to open up, of all the things that you've done in your entire life, what are the few things that you're most proud of? And what do they have in common? All right, so let's see. Chris Vogelmann, Consciousness as the Press Office, Not the CEO. I definitely need to read that book. Consciousness has been my primary interest since the 60s. Very interesting. Why Everyone Else is a Hypocrite, Evolution in the Modular Mind. Yep, that's the book. I'd love to know what you think, Christopher, after you read it. Question, in your opinion, who is the best American copywriter if you had to pick one person to write copy for a webinar that understands context? I don't think you can ask that question because I don't think there is one best copywriter. I think there are different copywriters to different markets. So I can't believe that, like I say, the late, great Clayton Makepeace, because there wasn't very long ago where he was not late. He was just great. But Clayton wrote for me on occasion, but he understood the investor mind a lot more than he understood the entrepreneurial mind. So even though I was a huge, and still am a huge fan of Clayton, And I think his writing captivated me more than almost any copy I ever read in my life. I wouldn't say that he was the best copywriter for the entrepreneurial market. I think that understanding the mind of what's going on in the target market is probably first and foremost the most important thing. And so I don't know that you can say a specific copywriter is the best. It's more about a specific copywriter best for a specific market. And even then, it's somewhat subjective, but that would probably be as far as I would go. Paula, thanks for the captions. Oh, you're welcome. Leon, at one point, Bryant Park in New York City was a rat hole of drug dealing and crime. Then a brilliant city designer decided to eliminate the tall hedges around the park. After they removed the hedges, the drug dealers couldn't hide. There was a new context to the park. After a while, Bryant Park became a jewel in the city. It was transformed. Exactly. Right? And yet, like so many other ways of trying to clean up that park was probably attempted. I don't know. And yet didn't work. And yet something simple could. And you know, it's kind of, you know, someone says something. And depending on the context that we are holding in our mind, that can come off as like that person's the biggest asshole in the world, or that person really needs to be commended on what they just said. And that's what I mean, that like reality is just so much more loose than we imagine. And as a marketer, I appreciate that, you know, we live in a world of ungrounded statements, meaning that they're not, you know, like, this is a good pen. Is it a good pen? Yeah, you know, and what's it good for? These are statements that are not tied to reality. They're subjective. It's a pen, that we know. It might be a pen that doesn't work. It might be a pen that works. If it's a pen that doesn't work, is it a bad pen? Well, it depends what we're using it for. If it doesn't work, maybe we can clean our ears with it, or we can scratch stuff off the table with it, or something else. And the game of marketing is to attach ungrounded statements to grounded reality in a way that our prospects and clients appreciate what the grounded reality is. That's another way of looking at it. Okay, let's see. Omar's got a deep question. What's the best mental models to assess past failures in the best possible way to understand if they were constraints that prevented you from achieving success, or the market, or timing, or anything else that you may be able to give insight on? I'm not sure, Omar. What I would say is that everything I don't always live up to this, so let me be clear first that I don't know that, you know, that well, let me just say what I was going to say. What I try and do is I try to eliminate the possibility of future regret. I never want to, because I've and it must have been a long time ago because I don't even remember, but because I've operated this way for a long time. I don't ever want to wish I would have done something different as far as like a campaign or a business or something like that. So, because to me, I'm very scared, I guess you could say, or I'm fearful of future regret. So I want to bring everything I can to what I'm doing so that if it doesn't work, there's no regret that I could have brought more. So like, and sometimes that way of operating doesn't jive well with other people. For example, a lot of times at Agora, right, it's a machine, and it's a project this week, a project next week, a project the following week. And when it comes to maximizing any specific project, that can disrupt the whole machine. I'm not the best at running that machine. I'm best at trying to maximize a project, right? So that's first and foremost. I don't like having future regret. And so that's what I try to eliminate in advance. That doesn't always mean that I perform at that level, but that's what I aspire to, and more often than not don't. Then if something doesn't work, I then try and dig into all, and this is probably not answering your question, but I'm not sure. I look at every little clue that I can, and by that I'm looking at metrics generally. I'm looking for indications of where it was off. Was the open rate low? Does that mean that like people opted in but were never really vested? Was the open rate not bad in comparison, but the click-through rate was low? And then was the message off? If the click-through rate was high and the open rate was high, but then the conversion, whatever conversions we were going for, was low, did I make a mistake on the positioning? You know, I've talked about this as it relates to market research, but I think it can apply to a lot of things. I really enjoy crime shows. I used to love to watch not the Forensic Files. And, you know, obviously when the police get to the crime scene, they want to know who did it, but that's not the question that they're asking at first. They're looking for clues. And too often I think entrepreneurs are looking for answers as opposed to first spotting the clues that will lead them to answers. The answers are the dots that you connect in your mind from the clues that you find. So anything that's an anomaly is a clue. And so when I've managed big businesses or small businesses, the way I generally manage is by exception, right? I'm looking for anything that is not within the realm of expectation, whether something's selling really well or something's selling really poorly, because it's on the exceptions that I'll find answers on how to improve. Whereas the things in the middle that are performing as they should there's nothing really to be gained there. So when I ran my clothing company, right, we had to sell the store out 5 times a year. That meant that every week we had to sell 10% of our inventory. I wasn't really interested in the things that were selling at 10% each week. I was interested in the stuff that was selling at 20% and 30%, and I was very interested in the stuff that was selling at 2% and 3%. The exceptions, not the rule. So those are clues as to what's going on. And, you know, if I'm consistently looking at the underperformers, I might find clues about where in the store things consistently underperform. And if I'm looking at the winners, where things consistently overperform. I won't find those looking at everything. So I guess to answer your question, I don't come to answers quickly. I look for clues first, and then I take them where they lead me to. I hope that helps, Omar. Rodney. Hi, Rich. Knowing what you now know, or know now, if you were to start your business all over again, what would you do differently and why? I've been very fortunate. So there wouldn't be very much I would change. I might do more of the things that happen by happenstance on purpose, but I feel very fortunate. I've been way more successful than I ever thought I was going to be. I really, like, my life radically changed after I wrote the Internet Business Manifesto. I just never expected it to change that much from writing 30 pages. And, you know, maybe I wouldn't have taken 5 years off after my midlife crisis. Maybe I would have taken 3 years off. Maybe I would have realized sooner that more of the problems in my life were caused by me, not by the external circumstances. But I don't think that's the question really asking me about my business. I guess if there was anything that I would have done differently, anything big, that I probably would have done a better job of holding on to the talented people that came through my life and gotten rid of the non-talented people a lot faster that went through my life. So I might have some regrets there, that I tolerated incompetence for far too long, and I didn't reward, like, amazing talent as quickly as I should have. I think more of the people issues probably. Recognizing a lot of what we're talking about here. I could have created a better context for my team at certain points. At certain other points in my business life, like when I was in the fashion business, we had a great context that just came. So I don't know that I created it or I created it unconsciously, as opposed to like maybe at the beginning of Strategic Profits, where it wasn't as strong as like what I had in the fashion business or music business. I guess in hindsight now, that was up to me to create, and I didn't appreciate it then. So I think it's more those kinds of things. But as far as marketing and things of that nature, when I first got involved in marketing, I took pictures with my heroes, Jay Abraham, John Carlton, Gary Halpert, and slowly but surely, those pictures of the legends that I respected became friends, peers, business partners. Not because I was targeting them, because it just happened. And so I just have so much to be grateful for. I just don't think there's that much I would change. And some of it, or most of it, it just happened. I worked hard, but a lot of people work hard. So yeah, it's probably not the best answer, Rodney. Maybe a different day I'll have a different answer. I apologize. True, perception is reality as it relates to marketing. It sure is. Tons of value bombs dropping. Cool. Having joy is a decision. Writing a book is a great way to get clarity. Like you, I think speaking is an awesome way to create a book. I just started to speak a book about public speaking. Is your speaking following a table of content for a book? No. At some point, I'm going to write a book. I mean, I've written thousands and thousands of pages. And writing to me is one of the most challenging things that I've ever done, but yet it's also some of the things I'm most proud of. And to me, and maybe this is why I write so slow, there's a level of thought in my writing that I think far surpasses my ability to speak it. I think because I'm so used to writing in my journal where I really do my heavy duty thinking, that I'm used to kind of thinking on paper. And so, what I can explain here, I believe, and I don't know if it's true, but this is what I believe, is a fraction of what I can communicate through the written word. Because when I'm writing, I am really writing slowly, and I'm really thinking hard about stuff. Whereas here, when we're talking, I don't have that opportunity. So it's much better than what I could come up with on the fly writing. But it's not, I wouldn't say it's much better than what I could come up with if I write very slowly. And I don't know and that just might be my own shit. Quite probably is my own shit. But I can tell you that the stuff I'm most proud of is some of the stuff I've written. And those aren't transcripts. Those are things I actually sat down and wrote somewhat slowly, painfully, and gruelingly. All right. Oh, well, thank you, Anna. I'm glad that you love how I go into flow, and I'm glad that you think it's fantastic. Okay. Almost sounds myopic, but how does context apply to copywriting? And which American copywriter do you suggest learning from? Who understands this application? Already absorbing Evaldo's 16-word sales letter. Well, I think if you're absorbing what Evaldo's teaching, you're in very good hands. And that not everything has to apply to making a sale. And what I would say is that appreciate, though, that your prospects are living in a context, and that context changes from time to time. So, like, for example, the survival niche pre-Trump was huge because the context that a lot of people were living in was that Obama, for the people in the survival niche, was that Obama was ruining this country and we were all going to shit, and therefore we had to prepare. The people in the survival niche. When Trump got elected, the people in the survival niche, the prospects, did not feel that same level of angst. And so the businesses in the survival niche shrank considerably. So you can understand that there are changes in your prospects context that can make all the difference. And that you can understand better by looking at the news sources that they follow, the actions they're taking, because actions are just another way of expressing a belief. Whenever someone takes an action, you can look at what must they believe to be true in order for that action to make sense, because every action makes sense to somebody. And you can reverse engineer that. I'm much more of a marketer than I am a copywriter, and there's a difference. A copywriter is trying to make the sale. A marketer is trying to set up the beliefs to make the sale. And so I spend my time on the belief side. Someone like Evaldo spends his time on the sales side. I'd like to believe I'm a better marketer than Evaldo is, and that Evaldo's a much better copywriter than I am. Don't know if that's true. I'd like to think that, because it would really suck if Evaldo was also better at marketing than me. That would I'd hang my head in shame, not because of Evaldo, but he's already a great copywriter. All right. Oh, okay, Alexa, you said you'd get to being cause of the matter. Yes. Okay, so that's a good point, and I do want to get back to that. So thank you, Alexa, for reminding me of that. And there's not that much to talk about here, but there is something to talk about. And so, there's this idea, right, with, let's see, that you're responsible for everything that happens in your life. And that's a better stance to take on than not so. And does that mean that, if you're standing under a building and an air conditioner falls on your head, that you're responsible? Yes, it does, because you're the one it's not your fault, but you are responsible. You're the one who got you in front of that building at the end of the day. And you could have been someplace else. Doesn't mean you're at fault. It just means that there is, you were the cause of it, of you being there. So being cause in the matter, right, starts with a willingness to experience yourself as a cause in the matter of your life. And when you look at it that way, then responsibility is not a burden. It's not a fault. It's not a way to take on praise. It's not a way to blame. It's not a way to get credit or to shame or to guilt. Because all of these are judgments, and they're evaluations of good and bad, right and wrong, better or worse. They're not responsibility, right? They are things that are kind of, let's see, they're derived from a ground of being in which the self is considered a thing or an object as opposed to a context. So being cause in the matter is looking at yourself as a context that's responsible for whatever shows up. So you are the source of what you are, what you do, and what you have. And that point of view extends to include even what is done to you, and ultimately what another person does to another person in front of you. So responsibility is a context, and it's a context of the self as the source for what is. So when you're the cause in the matter, right, then what you do is you take on, for lack of a better word, responsibility, right? But not in the way of good, bad, right, wrong, right, better, worse, but that you are responsible for whatever shows up. And, I've often said to entrepreneurs that a lot of times when you're changing the environment of your business, it will come down to a battle of wills between you and possibly your team. So you say that everyone needs to be here before 9 a.m. and someone comes in at 9:05. Their will is saying, I'm not going to listen to your dictate of 9 a.m. And if their will is stronger than your will, that you must be here before 9 a.m., they will win. If your will is stronger and you don't let it slide and you hold them to task, then over time, your will win out. But it's not guaranteed unless you hold that line and define what is okay and what is not okay in the context that you're creating. So being cause in the matter is really taking on ownership of what occurs out here in front of you and being responsible for it and being willing to address whatever is not in line with that context as you've defined it to be. Like saying that there's no iPad watching after 9 p.m. or, defining the mission statement or defining the priorities of the business or the goals or the purpose or anything else. And I know I'm kind of jumping, but I hope this is making sense. And we can get on to in the next live stream, I'll try and make it much more tactical so that we can kind of mix this up. So not every time is like a deep mental thing. What I can tell you is that I started reading a book. Where is this book? Hold on. Let me. I'm just gonna grab my iPad. I started reading this book yesterday, and it's very much related to everything that we've been talking about. And I was shocked because I wasn't reading it for that reason, but it reminded me a lot of this stuff. And I think this woman is spot on in a lot of the stuff that she's sharing. So hold on. So it's Contagious You. That's the name of the book. Contagious You by Anise Kavanaugh, who also wrote another book, I think called Courageous Culture or something like that. Contagious Culture. So this book is called Contagious You, and this is the book by Anise Kavanaugh. And this is all about, I thought it would be interesting for me to read as I'm doing these live streams because I'd like to be more contagious, like the idea kind of related to charisma, things like that. What she's talking about, a lot more than that, in fact, she hasn't talked about that at all, is talking about creating a context and really about personally creating a context as far as your intention, your emotions, and your presence, and whether or not that rises the level of the energy with the people around you or lowers it. And we all do both from time to time, but being clear about that and being much more intentional about that is what that book's about. And I find it fascinating. And I look forward to sharing a lot of that with you. Like I said, I started it yesterday, so I'm almost done. But then I have a second reading to do where I'm highlighting and really kind of contemplating it. So Alexa, thank you for reminding me that. Kayvon said, what's the name of the book about consciousness being the press office? That's why the book is Why Everyone Else is a Hypocrite. Ian says he can watch crime documentaries all day long. Me too. My favorite one these days, Ian, is That Chapter. That's the name of it. It's some guy on YouTube that I just absolutely love. He's got a weird sense of humor, but I love his content. So every time a new episode comes out, I watch it. Tom says, thank you so much for sharing and for Steal Our Winners content. It's awesome. Awesome to hear. Thank you, Tom. Very different than this content. Rodney, great answers. I'm curious to know, if possible, how do you earn income daily while having time to record these free Facebook Lives? Well, I have a business called Strategic Profits. One of our products is the one that Tom was just talking about, Steal Our Winners, which we haven't raised the price yet. I think we haven't even advertised it yet. We will be advertising it, I'm told, this week, and then we'll start to raise the price. Right now, it's $49 for the year, and it's anywhere from 8 to 12 interviews that I do that then get turned into strategy documents, plus the interviews with great marketers, media buyers, copywriters, etc., giving a strategy or a tactic that's currently working that most people wouldn't know about, and the goal that I task them with is give me something that after you explain it, me and the audience are so excited about it, we want to run to our computer and do it. So that's one. I also have a coaching program which is not being marketed right now, but that's the one that, like, Todd Brown, Ryan Dice, Brunson, all those guys went through. That will be marketed again sometime soon, probably in the next couple of months. And right now, what this is about for me, Rodney, is just I've taken a lot of time off. There's a lot of people in the marketplace who've been around long enough who know who I am, but anyone who's joined the online world in the last 5 years probably doesn't know who I am, although they know either who my students are or my students' students. Like the live stream I did a week or two ago with Katrina Ruth. She learned from a gentleman by the name of Yaros Starek. Yaros Starek was in my early coaching program. And so, there's people that Katrina's taught who would have never heard of me before. Yet some of the principles and concepts that I taught to Yarek, that Yarek taught to Katrina, that Katrina taught to her followers are things that I originated back like 20 years ago. So this is just a way for me to kind of get my feet wet again, say hello to the world, expose myself more so that as we start gearing up, more people know who I am. Because, when you're outside of awareness for too long, you can become somewhat irrelevant, or at least not relevant in people's minds, because they have no perspective of where you fit into things. Hope that helps. Okay. Lewis, I completely agree with the way of looking at things. The success principles that has helped me the most in my life is taking 100% responsibility for my life, not 99%, 100%, no matter the circumstances. Agree 100%, Lewis. It's sometimes very difficult, and I wouldn't say that I've mastered it. A lot of times, I'll be in a good mood. Maybe Kim says something, and now that put me in a bad mood, when in reality, did it? Like, could I have operated differently? Could I have taken that to mean something else? So, I try to, and later on when I'm reflecting in my journal, I'll recognize where I could have done better, but it's definitely something to aspire to, and something that I try to aspire to. Yes, Jocko Willnick's book, Extreme Ownership, is a great example about that. All right. Let's see. So also, just to remind everyone, we're going to have another contest for those who share, tell others about it, pass the word on. So if you haven't done so, I'd really appreciate it. One of the reasons I do this is to get the word out more, let more people in the world kind of be exposed to me, and then decide for themselves whether I'm right for them or not. And I get that there's a lot of people I'm not right for, but there are quite a few people I am right for. And so my goal is to be doing these lives so that the people I resonate are the people I resonate with, and the people that don't. And let me answer Jay's question. So when I started my online business in late 2018, my niche was empowering fathers financially. My business was named Prepared Fathers. Due to the pandemic, I pivoted to teaching teenagers about finances. I have 2 teens myself. The product created is called the Teen Finance Accelerator. The ad for this has been running on Facebook to parents of teenagers, and to my surprise, 95% of the parents who like, share, and ultimately have bought are all mothers. I have received the suggestion that I might want to change my business website name to something more conducive for parents as opposed to fathers. I have lots of collateral buildup under the name Prepared Fathers and really don't want to change it. Any thoughts towards an elegant solution? That's really interesting. In hindsight, I can say that's not too surprising, right? In general, right? I know some very engaged fathers, but I certainly know a lot more engaged mothers than I do fathers. So that's not surprising. I would want to know. I'd want to speak to the women that bought and find out what did they think of the name Prepared Fathers, and was that something that was an obstacle in any way, shape, or form, or was it not? And possibly think I'm not the best with names, so I'll say that up front. I've always struggled with coming up with good names. I think Strategic Profits and Steal Our Winner. It's probably the two best names I have. But yeah, like I wonder how many of those mothers believe it's the father's job, but either they think their husband is not as engaged enough as he should be, or maybe there's no father around, and if so, then the name might have helped, not hurt, but I'm not sure. One of the things, and it's the luxury of being a coach, right? Is that a coach, to really do their job, has to really appreciate the clients in front of them, and the way they do that is through dialogue. And in the coaching environment and in the coaching conversation, people have to be open and real. And so what's often divulged in a coaching conversation from a marketing standpoint is pure gold, not marketing to that individual, but that person articulating what most people believe, but nobody says. And so I always default back to that. And there's this great book, well, not a great book, a good book. And I think the book was written more for the intent of trying to sell you on the services of the company. But I think there's a lot of truth to what the book shares. And I think you can kind of read it on two tracks. One, does this book get me to want to contact the company? And if so, what is it about this book that's making me want to do that? And then two, can I kind of nail down what they're talking about here as the sales moment? And the book is called The Perfection of Marketing. And it's a small book. I think it's like 100 pages or something like that. So you can read it. It's a quick read. But it's talking about the moment where someone makes the buy or no buy decision. And I found as a coach, it's really easy to get access to that information. But I think if you understand that, I'd be curious as to the mothers that did buy, what made them buy when it was called what it was called. And it's certainly worthy of a test. And, you can test, you can change the ads and still deliver the same product with, just doing it kind of ghetto style for a little while to see if it makes a difference. So now that having said that, I would probably take back half my answer and say that I would split test it out of the gate just to see. And you can design a test like that relatively cheaply to kind of get an answer. But while I was doing that, I'd still talk to the mothers because it might open up some other ideas for you. So hopefully, Jay, that makes sense. All right. So got 15 more minutes here for the budgeted time, and I'm more than happy to stick around if you guys have questions. If you already asked it and I didn't answer, it's probably because I scrolled past it too quickly. I apologize, but you can ask it again and I'd be glad to. And if not, we can always end a little early. It's totally okay. I've still got stuff on my schedule to get done today. I owe Matt Risby a call. You can join the conversion club here. I think maybe I'll have links to Steal Our Winners next time. So that'll be cool. I'm doing another live stream on Thursday. No idea what I'm going to be talking about, but maybe I'll talk more about what I learned from that book, Courageous You, or Contagious. Is it Courageous You or is it Courageous You? Contagious You, right. Sometimes when I'm reading that book, it should be called Courageous You. So, yeah, let's see. If not... did you read and like Matthew Sweezy's recent book, The Context Marketing Revolution? No, I haven't. Or other than Ann Kavanaugh, do any other books come up? Related to this, not so much. I did, one of the books I'm really a big fan of, but I think it's also because it melds with my philosophy of the world, is The Courage to Be Disliked. It's based on a lot of Alfred Adler's work. Alfred Adler is the psychologist who a lot of the transformation stuff is based on. Alfred Adler was a peer of Freud and Jung's. He's actually was the first president of the Psychoanalytic Society, but his viewpoints were very different than Freud and Jung's. It kind of split off before they split off. So I forget. You could say if Freud and Jung are very theological, and I might have that wrong, they might be etological, then Adler is the opposite. So he's etological. And if it's the other way, then vice versa. So an example of that is you asked me about my dad, and I have some bad things to say about him. Now, from a regression back to cause kind of thing, like Freud and Jung, they would say that in my childhood, things happened with my dad that wasn't so great, and therefore I am kind of projecting that forward. Whereas Adler would say that there's a future reason why I think of bad thoughts about my dad and not the good thoughts. Because there's no doubt that my dad did good things and bad things. And that, so the thoughts I currently hold are related to some future goal as opposed to some past. Because some people have a past and feel differently. You know, some people can have trauma and excel. Some people could have trauma and self-destruct. So, you know, what is it then that causes like the current now? And Adler was much more about the future. So maybe I'm afraid of being compared to my dad. So therefore, it's convenient for me to think bad thoughts about my dad. Maybe that doesn't discount that there was a past and things happened, but more often than not, you can more often than not, my experience in marketing says that we're all evidence collectors, and it's very easy to accumulate evidence one way or the other on many things, right? We love someone, then we don't love someone. So, I'm a fan of Adler because of that, Alfred Adler, and this book, The Courage to be Disliked, is very much a book based on Alfred Adler's work. It was a bestseller in Japan. That's actually how I came across the book. I was sitting on the Amtrak train coming back from Baltimore from Megora, and the guy sitting across from me was reading it, and it said bestseller in Japan, 3 million units sold. And I was like, wow, I don't think I've ever read a bestseller from Japan. Let me read that. So that was a book I really liked. The book Driven, the red cover, I forget who wrote it, but that's all about the ADD mind. I found that kind of fascinating because I've read a lot of books on ADD. And it gave me a perspective I hadn't seen or come across, which resonated very deeply with me. Tiago Fort's book, which isn't out yet, and he's working on the version now, but he wrote a different book. He wrote a book that was his first attempt at writing a book before he got an agent and all that. And I think the book is going to be called Build a Second Brain. I'm a big fan of Tiago's. He's got a blog called Praxis, which I'm also a big fan of. He writes very deeply, and he connects a lot of dots that I enjoy. Trying to think of what else I've read recently that really kind of resonated. Let's see. The challenge is that my elliptical is broken, so that really screwed up my reading for about a month. Because I love to read. Oh, I just read The Formula. I like that book. That's the science behind why people succeed or fail. And it's much more about network science than, the internal stuff that we kind of were talking about. The pattern system I just read, The 3-Minute Rule, was recommended by Todd Brown to me, and that was a great book for marketers. The Road Less Stupid keeps being recommended to me, so I have to read it. It feels like it's probably a lot of stuff that I've taught. Maybe that's why I'm a little reluctant. Maybe it's the book I should have written. I don't know. I'm just looking through my books here, and I think One to Many by Jason Fladling, that was a really good book about webinars. I thought he did a really good job. No doubt, the 16-word sales letter by Evaldo is an amazing copywriting book. Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. I loved that book. That's a book. I read that book. It's a book. It's a book written by a psychologist about some things that she's going through as she's also writing about her clients. And when I read it, it affected me in a deep way. So much so I sent it to my old psychologist. Not that she's old, but I worked with her a long time ago, and sent it to her, and I was like, I hope I'm not person A here. But let's see. Let's get back to the questions. Omar, What is the best strategy to release a report to get the maximum spread? This is probably not what you want to hear, Omar, but write something that's worth spreading. I mean, I had a long conversation about this today. It's like, what do you, someone asked me like, what should someone do if their audience is not engaging with them? And so I said, well, the very first thing is to really get honest with themselves about, is the stuff that they're producing worthy of being engaged with? And if it's not, you got to fix that first and foremost. And so the best strategy to release a report that's going to get the maximum spread is to write something that when people read it, they feel the need to share it because they've just learned something about themselves and feel that others would benefit if they learned about that. So that, I think, is what made the manifesto and the entrepreneurial emergency work so well. That people read it, and I think the manifesto beat out the entrepreneurial emergency because it was shorter. It was only 30 pages. I think the entrepreneurial emergency might have been 60 or 80 pages. So that's first. And then the ones that I wrote that had the most pass along were they redefined the problem, which turned current problems into symptoms of a deeper problem. And if you have questions about that, ask me in the Conversion Club group. So Jay wants to know, can I be more specific about split tests for mothers versus fathers? Test ads, websites? Yeah, I would just create a different landing page. I would create a different ad. I don't know your whole business, so it's hard for me to say, but I don't know how many pages people come across before they purchase, but it really wouldn't be that hard to create another version of the whole site by changing out the headers, and it wouldn't be perfect, but it would give you some sense of whether or not you're paying a price for having it be targeted to fathers versus targeted to mothers. Potentially having it targeted to both is probably the answer, but you won't know that until you test. And, it's like you don't have to change everything. You just have to change whatever the customer needs to come across before they purchase. And you could use something like Deadline Funnel, that Jack Bourne's company, to make sure that people are cookied and stay within the lane of what they were coming across. And if you didn't, but if you're running ads, so much of this can just be recreated pretty quickly. So that's what I mean. And I hope that helps. And then Omar says, is it possible to pitch Agora in the health niche? Yeah, most of the people in the Conversion Club are in the finance, but if you have a great idea, I'm sure they can pass it along. So there are numerous people. It's easier when we're out of quarantine and we're all in the office, but definitely possible. All right. So I think I'm going to wrap a few minutes early. It's been great to have you guys here. I hope that today was interesting, if not useful and helpful. This is a very deep issue, what we were talking about today. And it's something that I don't pretend to have mastered myself, but it's something that I'm consistently trying to improve myself on, trying to create a context where people can thrive around me and because of my presence. And that's not always easy, but it's something that I recognize that first I must take responsibility for, and then attempt to ratchet up my game as I commit to a bigger cause, right? And to make that cause into a reality by being totally responsible for it, causing the matter, right? And that if it's meant to be, I'm going to be the one that has to do it. And therefore, because of that, what's called out of me is something better than what I was capable of in the past. So with that said, join the Conversion Club. Like I said, it's free. And I really want to appreciate each and every one of you, whether you shared or not, whether you commented or not. This would be a horrible place to be if I was talking completely to myself. So I really just want to thank you for listening to what I had to share, and I hope it helps. And if I can help you with different content, let me know. I read all the comments, not only while it's live, but also afterwards. And we'll be back on Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Until then, to higher profits and beyond, Rich Schefren, over and out.